The haunted silver clock. A man buys an old, peculiar clock at a flea market, unaware that the object is cursed. With every tick, he begins to notice changes in his reality while being pursued by disturbing, inexplicable visions. As time goes on, he discovers that the clock not only controls time but also his sanity. The line between the real and the supernatural begins to blur, and he must confront the object he brought into his life or succumb to its fatal influence. The camera slowly zooms in on a bustling flea market on a busy street. The air is heavy, and the sunlight is dim, creating a melancholic tone. Stalls are crammed with old objects, furniture, dusty toys, and forgotten relics. Some objects carry the weight of many years. Some are forgotten, others hold stories, but few have the power to change the fate of those who find them. The protagonist, Antonio, 30s, a regular man dressed simply, walks slowly between the stalls. He appears distracted, browsing through various items until something catches his eye. An antique silver clock, placed on a hidden shelf under a cloth. Antonio approaches the stall and examines the clock. The object is small, with intricate details and an inscription on the back, but he cannot read it due to the thick layer of dust. The vendor, an old man with a taciturn expression, watches him with a faint smile. "Vendor, this clock, it has a story. No one has ever bought it, yet it always shows up. If you're willing to take it, perhaps it will find you." Antonio smiles uncomfortably but decides to buy the clock, finding it interesting and mysterious. He pays the vendor and leaves the market, now with the clock in his hands. Some choices are not made by chance, and certain objects, as simple as they may seem, know who is destined to possess them. The beginning of the change. Back at home, Antonio places the clock on his desk. He observes the object with curiosity, but something feels off. The ticking sound starts to grow louder as he looks at it more closely. The camera focuses on the clock, showing the smooth, imprecise movement of its hands. Suddenly, the lights flicker, and a faint tremor shakes the room. Antonio quickly gets up, looking around, but sees nothing unusual. The ticking continues, now faster, as if the clock is pulsing with life. The next morning, Antonio wakes up and notices it's already 10 a.m., though he could swear he had only slept for a few hours. He feels a strange sense of disorientation. Looking at the clock, he sees the hands in a different position, as if time itself had shifted. There are objects that do not just measure time. They manipulate it, distort it, and trap it. And when they start meddling with reality, there is no turning back. The clock reveals its power. Antonio begins to notice strange changes in his routine. Whenever the clock strikes certain hours, he experiences visions and feelings of déjà vu, as if reliving past moments. The environment around him subtly but terrifyingly changes. Doors that were once closed now stand open. Photos he doesn't remember taking appear on his desk. In one vision, he sees an older version of himself, with empty eyes and a look of despair. He tries to scream, but the image vanishes as quickly as it appeared. In the mirror, his reflection appears distorted, as if it exists in a different place. When he touches the mirror's surface, the reflection freezes momentarily, as if time itself has stopped. The visions grow more frequent and intense. He begins hearing whispers calling his name, coming from within the house, but whenever he follows the sound, he finds nothing. The revelation. Desperate, Antonio starts researching the clock. He finds an old book with a highlighted, dusty, and nearly illegible page. The page reads, "The silver clock does not measure hours but destinies. Those who possess it can never escape its control." Antonio tries to rid himself of the clock, but it seems glued to his hand, as if an invisible force is holding it in place. He closes his eyes, trying to calm himself, but a terrifying vision appears. He sees the flea market vendor, his eyes glowing with a cruel expression. "Vendor, you cannot escape. The clock is the guardian of time, and now you are its prisoner." Antonio feels an icy chill through his body. and the clock begins emitting a strange, hypnotic sound, as if calling him inside. The climax. Terrified, Antonio attempts to destroy the clock. He slams it against the floor, but the object remains unbroken. Instead, the ticking grows louder, unbearable, and he sees quick flashes of multiple versions of himself, each living different realities, all trapped by the clock. He finds himself in a dark room where time seems non-existent. All his reflections are frozen, as if waiting for something. The clock continues ticking, each tick a breath of eternity. In a moment of despair, Antonio screams and throws the clock against the wall. The sound abruptly stops. He collapses to the floor. Conclusion. A few days later, Antonio returns to the flea market, determined to find the vendor and return the clock. When he reaches the stall, it's empty. The vendor is gone, and all that remains is the clock. Now on a new shelf, with a tag reading "Sold," Antonio picks up the clock, now void of power, and stares at it with an empty look. As he turns to leave the stall, he feels a presence behind him. Turning around, all he sees is the reflection of his own hollow, tormented gaze. Some objects do not just leave marks on our memories. They leave marks on our souls. And time never goes back. The clock continues ticking as the camera slowly pulls away, revealing the silent city. The ticking is the only sound that lingers.